chapter on this, the EU superstate future base of Antichrist, in our book, Goodbye America, Goodbye Britain. The book that I originally wrote back in the 90s and then reprinted in the 2000s, EU Final World Empire, is now out of print, but you may be able to get some second-hand copies on Amazon. Anyway, it's all coming together at a rate of knots, and as countries run into crisis, particularly financial crisis, that is being used to pull it all into a very centralised organisation, all ready for the man of sin to step forward and put his hands on the levers of control which are already in place. Are we really coming to the end of our age? And does the Bible really indicate that? Well, you can see date-setters and doomsayers and people who are predicting the end of the world through the ages. But there is a time when these things really are being fulfilled, and this is the time we're in now. So yes, is the answer. Daniel's prophecy of the 70 weeks is the key to understanding biblical and world history. This is the key. The 70 weeks of Daniel is what it says. 70 weeks have been decreed for your people, that's the Jews. 70 weeks of years, 70 times 7 years, 490 years. 69 weeks of years, 483 years, took us up to our Lord's triumphal entry into Jerusalem. 7 years are yet to run. That's the 70th week of Daniel. Those 7 years comprise the day of the Lord, also known as the Great Tribulation. The Jews call it the time of Jacob's troubles. It's the worst time in the history of the world for the Jewish people, and it will be worse than the Holocaust. More will be killed there than in the Holocaust. 2/3 of those who are in Israel at the time will die under Antichrist's onslaught. That's not too far away. If you look at Daniel chapter 9, it makes it clear the first 69 weeks of years would have ended in the week of the crucifixion. Since then, we've been living in the church age. This has to finish before the final week of years, the 7 years, can run its course. When we are raptured, that is the finish of the church age. The prophecy clock stopped. We're living on borrowed time. Since the Lord returned to heaven at the end of the 69th week of Daniel, that's when the prophetic clock stopped. The final week of 7 years is yet to begin. It's this 7 dreadful years, the worst time in the history of the world, when the greater part of the world's population will be destroyed by warfare and famine and pestilence and earthquakes of all kinds. It's going to be a terrible time. Every good reason for getting our friends and relatives saved so they're taken out of it in the rapture. And as you know, I'm a strong proponent of the pre-tribulational rapture. We write about it in some of our books. The final week will start when Antichrist signs his 7-year peace treaty with Israel. The church must be removed in the rapture so the final week can begin. The rapture doesn't start the seven years. The time of Jacob's troubles, as the Jews call it, starts as per Daniel 9, verse 27, when he, referring to Antichrist, will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week, a week of 7 years. After the rapture, we talked about that a little bit earlier, how the New Ages are getting ready with their explanations. I believe that's one of the reasons why we're seeing reports of flying saucers around the world.
That's right.
Because they say this is a supernatural event. The doom mongers, the naysayers, the people who needed re-educating and bringing back into the New World Order, they've been taken out of the world so that they won't stand in the way of the progress towards the New World Order. That is what's going to happen. Antichrist will be energized by Satan, Daniel 8:24. He will seem to me with the man with all the answers to the world's problems. He will take over the European Union through skillful intrigue, according to Daniel chapter 8, verse 23. When you see the world's politicians, and we've met a number of them, British ones anyway, when you see them on the world stage, they're like pygmies really. They're not able to come up with concrete solutions that work. They haven't got the people behind them. In most countries, if you did a poll, America, Britain, across Europe, and probably across most of the world, people have no confidence in their leaders. They are looking for a strong leader. They're going to get a very strong leader. They'll get what they wish for, but they'll wish they hadn't wished for it. Exactly. Antichrist, we've been talking about deception today. Deception in cults, deception in the church, deception out there in the world. Antichrist will deceive most of the people most of the time. He will be the great deceiver. This 7-year tribulation starts with this treaty that will seem to bring peace to the Middle East. It's not going to be Tony Blair that does it, the peace envoy of the quartet. No, he will do it, and it will enable the Jews to rebuild their temple. That's the temple that will be desecrated by Antichrist midway through the 7 years, 3.5 years into the tribulation period. That's referenced in Daniel chapter 9, verse 27. That's when finally the Jews see through this man and realise they've been duped, and the Bible says you should flee because, just get out of it before you're killed, basically. And they're going to go to Petra, Bozrah, as the Bible calls it, which is in Jordan, not too far from Jerusalem, actually. So that's where a remnant, a third of the Jews, will be supernaturally protected during the final part of the 7-year tribulation. The great deceiver will be there, and he'll be like a kind of dictator, a Mussolini, a Hitler. He'll be acclaimed by people at first because they are moved, they are desperate, they are crying out for strong leadership. They're so disenchanted with what's happening. No one has a solution. They are doing patched up solutions to the world's problems, of which there are many. People like me and others have been talking for years about the book of Daniel and the revived Roman Empire. And this was rather interesting because the EU, under José Manuel Barroso, President of the European Commission, said that we are the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire has returned. This was the title of an exhibition they staged, an official exhibition. And this is what Barroso said a few years back. Sometimes I like to compare the EU to the organisation of an empire. We have a dimension of empire. It's the new empire, the new revived Roman Empire. The Treaty of Rome in 1957 set off this whole process, by the way. They had a circus tent put up outside the Parliament building in Brussels, and I often joke that, well, of course, as Brussels is run by a bunch of clowns, the circus tent's very appropriate. Inside, their exhibition gave the game away. I was delighted when I saw this. It was a eureka moment because they said, this is the revived Roman Empire. That was the title of their exhibition. I thought, gotcha. Because they're moving out into North Africa, all the places the Roman Empire ruled over there, trying to get hold of. The Roman Empire returns. That was the title. The European Union said, and they're very full of themselves, they said, once we get to 50 states, at the moment it's 28, it will be renamed the Union, not just the European Union. See how it's spreading? And they say the UN headquarters will move to Europe. When I tell them that in America, they say, good, get it out in New York, where the Rockefellers gave the land, by the way. They said in this exhibition, which presumably had official sanction, it was right outside the Parliament, nothing happens in the EU without top-down sanction. The EU will take over from America. I think that America is pretty much at the end of its time as a real superpower. This will be the European century. The EU will dominate the world via its enormous legal and moral reach. I thought immoral is more like it. Yeah. So now you know, when you read books that great dictators or would-be dictators and tyrants have written prior to them gaining power, Hitler wrote Mein Kampf, and he set out exactly what he was going to do. They have said in Europe many times over exactly what they're going to do. We should start to take it seriously. Vote UKIP. Anyway, because well, what happened yesterday?
Don't say.
Oh, he's actually throw one of his members.
Oh, you mustn't take too much notice. The press hates UKIP because mostly they support the big party. So if some obscure councillor somewhere or other says something stupid, they blow it up. And UKIP says, no. Parties are made up of lots of ordinary people, small and large, important and unimportant. If someone, they've all got lunatics in them, and you must bear in mind that the press is out to get UKIP because they know it will keep the Conservatives and Liberals that are in Labour out of power, probably. So they hate it, you see. Bear that in mind. If someone told me, oh, did you know they're anti-Israel? Absolute claptrap. They're not at all. It's just some obscure councillor made some ridiculous remark, and that was blown up by the press. Don't trust the press. Big media doesn't tell the whole story. It doesn't entirely lie. It just tells a little fragment of the truth. The European Union is now 28 countries, over 500 million citizens, and they presented me with this map when I was over there once. Now they've branched out. This is something called the Union for the Mediterranean. I think it's a former palace in Barcelona in Spain. This is the headquarters for the Union for the Mediterranean. This is very interesting. Takes in Israel and all the countries around the Mediterranean, you see. Members of the Union for the Mediterranean, the blue states are the 27, now 28 existing European Union members. The yellow states are the partner or future member states. You see how they're reaching out their tentacles and they're getting all this. What they're doing, first of all, is harmonising laws and rules and regulations. Same thing that they're doing in North America, between Canada, America and Mexico. If you want to actually get a legislative body that controls a whole area of countries, first of all you have to harmonise the rules. Then you say, well, we need a centralised body to apply all those rules, you see. Kind of a dozen different parliaments or 3 dozen different parliaments. It's got to be one central body. It's all gravitating towards centralised control and the man who's going to be at the levers of power. So all these nations are actually like, they're not called associate members, but they're like allied to the European Union. The first meeting of the Union for the Mediterranean was in January 2010, and they said the aim is to give the relationship between the EU and this new body of Mediterranean states a territorial dimension. You have to look between the words and see what they're really talking about. The Mediterranean Union and the European Union, this is crucial again, aim to share a common judicial area. Now, how the laws on homosexuality are going to be applied in Islamic countries, I don't know. But somehow or other, this is their plan. This is what they've said. They said, we'll focus on energy, security, counter-terrorism and trade. Well, that encompasses a large part of life and commerce and everything else. A large swathe of life is going to be under the control of the EU, even in countries outside of the EU. Iceland, I saw an interview yesterday with the Prime Minister of Iceland. Well, some of them have strange interests, you know. And it was quite interesting because he said, we're getting less keen on going into the European Union, but we're meshed in with the common trade policies and so on and so on. And I thought, yeah, you actually have to do as you're told, as Israel will. This is how it's all leading up to the signing of the peace treaty, because if you want to trade with the EU, you'll bend to their will. It's a mighty trading bloc of over 500 million people. Little Israel, other little countries, they'll have to do as they're told. If Iceland is told to give up its fishing grounds, just like we were, we had a thriving fishing industry, more or less destroyed, you'll give it up, because that's what the EU says is going to happen. As you come in under passport control, you don't come in with anything with a Union Jack on it anymore. It's Euro passport control. This is at Heathrow, was I took that, I think. And there we go. It's all common market, EU, whatever. And the 2 passports are quite interesting. When we travel now with the latest one, which at the very top has got European Community at the top. So the most authoritative and powerful body is not the British Parliament, not the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, it's the European Community. Only secondarily is the nation state mentioned. You see, the nation states are gradually being subsumed and abolished. The old passport very clearly stated at the top, this was a British passport. No more, no such thing. They're common across Europe. We've even got common driving licenses. The Queen, rather foolishly, she signed a lot of laws into practice which, as head of the Church of England, she certainly shouldn't have done. She could have refused to sign the law on sodomy, for example, making so-called homosexual marriages legal or semi-legal and so on. She need not have signed that. She could have stood up for the faith that she's pledged to defend. The coronation oath says that she's pledged to actually defend the Reformed faith and so on, but she never does. And in 2008 she signed the Lisbon Treaty, which abolished herself basically, because there are no constitutional monarchs in the European Union. There's no place in the constitution of the Lisbon Treaty for monarch. At the moment, the monarchy, I studied, one of the things I did was British Constitution, and the monarchy has more power it uses and could use, it could actually have a big influence, because they can actually withdraw their support, say, no, I refuse to sign that, and believe me, the country would rally to a monarch who said that, I believe anyway. So it's a great pity that our Queen, who in many ways is admirable, in some ways it's just not done the right thing, and it's sad to me. But I suppose here it is, prophecy rolling forward. They're trying to build a super state, so every May we have Europe Day, where we go out and dance around the maypole, or not, you see. It's celebrated, and it's a celebration of building Europe together. Their motto is ever closer union, by the way, so we know where we're going. Forgive me if I've shown some of you this before, but I thought it was rather interesting. This is something that Pat did a campaign on, and it led to a debate in Parliament, and in fact one of those occasions where a little bit of pushback came from the European Union power grab. This is the MP for Aldershot, he became Minister for the Armed Forces actually. Gerald Howarth is a great guy. If we had about 300 more MPs like him, Britain would be a much better place, I can tell you. He fought like crazy against all this homosexual legislation. He's very, very good. And he said that you're not allowed to put the Union Jack on the number plates. That's why we printed some up and we've got them here to sell, because we like the stars of Europe covered up, you see. So he said this is illegal, but I'm going to do it anyway. I mean, it was raised in Parliament, it went on TV and all sorts of things. And at the end, they backed down. The EU gave way. It's like a bit of salt on the slug. It will step back very quickly. But it was just a little victory, but it was quite symbolic. We should be allowed to actually show and display our national flag if we choose to. We're not just a small fragment of a super state. And here he is pasting on his Union Jack with great pride, which I thought was very good. What we've had, and people have actually, it's like the boiling of the frog story in the pot, you know, little bit, the water heats up, and the frog doesn't realise he's being cooked. Well, we're well cooked, we're about 90% cooked by now, because it's been done with deception. In America, when I talk about this, people say to me, how could the British people, the proud British people who fought 2 world wars to keep their country out of the clutches of tyranny, how could they go along with all this? How could they meekly hand over, oh well, this is our country, have it, we don't care, what's on telly, you know, because I said, well, one of the reasons is they're very apathetic. The average Brit is obsessed with sport and soap operas, and that's what they're interested in, that's what they talk about, and to get a serious subject aired in a serious way, like I'm trying to do with you, very, very difficult. Most people haven't got the attention span to listen to it. They're educated, or not educated at all really, but they're brought up to listen to sound bites, little tiny snippets and nibs of news. And the fact is that you'll learn very little if you watch TV news. Some works in TV news, and it's kind of on a spool that goes around all the time, the same few fragments of news. 98% of all that happens in the world is never reported, because it's got to be visual. They've got to have a TV film crew within easy reach of it, so they go out from London, so mostly it's London orientated. And if it's from outside Parliament, they'll cover it. If it's in the north of Scotland, they probably won't. So you get a very fragmented picture of the news. So all this has gone under the surface. It's all happened bit by bit by bit. They, a few years ago, tried to bring in the Constitution for Europe. When it was actually called a constitution, a lot of countries said, oh, we don't want that. We don't want a super state. So they said, okay. They renamed it the Lisbon Treaty. Exactly the same document, apart from a very few minor cosmetic changes. They said, oh, that sounds okay, that sounds all right. Lisbon's quite a nice place, I went there on holiday once, we're starting there, past the beer, you know. So we get duped. But this is coming back to the biblical theme. The revived Roman Empire. Where did all this start? In Rome. 1957, politicians from 6 countries met in Rome to set up what was called the common market. And of course, that's a very easy thing to sell to the average Brit, the English and the Welsh, the Scots, whatever, the Irish, because the Northern Irish, because we like markets. I grew up with street markets in our hometown. A lot of towns still have them. And, you know, it's a kind of fun place to buy. There's all sorts of bargains of fruit and veg and whatever. So it sounds good, and people were sold on the idea, oh, well, you can actually go over to France and get, you know, wine, and it won't cost you nearly as much. And if you go on holiday, you won't have to keep changing your money. It's ever so convenient. And it was sold on little tiny unimportant things like this, none of which really came true anyway, because the wine is still expensive. But they sold it. The Germans were worried about whether the Deutschmark was fit with the new. If they gave up the Deutschmark, I heard a lot of debate about this. They said, "Will the new notes fit into our wallets?" As if that's important. It really was astonishing because I think I may have told you before, but I was as a reporter for a business paper. I was in the European Parliament when they passed all this legislation, listened to the debate, and they were voting on abolishing their currencies. So the French gave up the franc, the Germans abolished the Deutschmark, the Italians the lira, the Dutch the guilder, and so on. And I thought, this is going to spark a furious debate. You know, if I give you my wallet and say, well, you can have 98% of the say over how I spend it, but I get 2% just to actually spend as I wish, you know, which is pretty much what happened. All the things that are happening now are EU inspired, by the way, from the closure of post offices to the high-speed rail line, all coming from the EU. And so I thought, well, there'll be some fiery debate. People will stand up and say, I object. No one did. It was almost like mass hypnotism. I'm not saying it was, but that's what it was like. They were sleepwalking to tyranny. And the people there, I thought, this is really odd. It didn't. My recollection was that the debate didn't last long. And after we all adjourned for a good slap-up lunch, they do a good lunch on the taxpayer in the European Union, and they treat the press very well because they want favourable reporting. They mostly get it. So we went up there, and there's myself and a radio reporter and about 6 MEPs, and I said, well, congratulations, today you've made history. And they said, oh, yes, we have. And these are not stupid people. They were clever people, like barristers and so on. They're not silly, just uninformed and without wisdom, but not silly. There's a difference. And I said, so I said, we've got a common currency, you've got a common parliament, and I said, a common set of laws, common judicial area being set up, Euro Army, Euro Corps, and so on. I said, what happens next? And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, the motto is ever closer union. And I said, well, you're going to get one leader. I said, you know, and everybody knows that the present arrangement for taking decisions is cumbersome. You can't have 28 countries arguing about what to do. It's going to be centralised, and pretty soon you're going to have a strong leader. They said, yeah, we need an elected leader, one ruler, one leader. I said, yeah, you'll get one. You'll get the strong man. As Europe falls to pieces, which it is doing, I said, you'll get the strong man. And then what? They said, what do you mean? I said, well, knowing the history of Europe, read your history books, you'll get one Führer, one dictator, one Führer, and then, I sort of bombshelled them, I said, and then maybe one Antichrist. And they looked at me like I was crackers, I remember. And I said, that's what the Bible says is going to happen. He's going to come out of the revived Roman Empire, and I can see it before our eyes today. All the steps, like a great jigsaw falling into place, a cosmic jigsaw. It's amazing what's happening. It was subsequently revealed and admitted that the Treaty of Rome and the common market it then was never intended to just be about trade. Today, Europe has its own anthem, its flag, laws, courts, army, police force, and currency. I've got the anthem here. It's all about the shrine of the goddess, actually. It's amazing. I won't sing it, I promise you. We're in a country called Europe. Romano Prodi said when he was president of the EU that he wants a common EU policy on foreign affairs. Very important for Israel. Defence, law and order, and the power to dictate tax and spending policies to all countries in the European Union. He wants the EU, he said, to be a grand political project and a supranational democracy. There's very little democracy in the EU because the Parliament there has no real power. They can't propose legislation. An MP cannot bring forth legislation. It comes down from the executive. They can amend it, but they can't change it that much. Direct taxation of all citizens is another plan, so they're gradually extending control over every aspect of our lives. That includes spiritual. Brussels would be Europe's sole representative on all international bodies, and there will be an integrated European police force. These are all in the plans. A daughter in Israel, when she wanted to renew her passport, had to send it to the French embassy. That's how integrated we are, you see. The first EU embassy is already opened. I believe it was in Africa, actually. But it's already happening. They've got their own diplomatic corps and so on. We are sleepwalking to tyranny. Have you noticed, if you watch most TV programs these days, from the BBC to Animal Planet to Discovery channels, they always talk in metric. It's 50 kilometers, it's so many meters, so many centimeters, we have 8 centimeters of rain or whatever. They're trying to drive down the importance of pounds and ounces. You'll see the road signs change within a year or two, because the young generation has only grown up with metric. As we become more commonality with the rest of Europe, so it will be easier to rule as one nation. The only big nation at the moment using imperial measure, non-metric, is America. So you still get, we watch Fox News quite a bit, and you still get the measurements of rainfall in feet, and they went 50 miles or so, and we did 100 miles an hour or whatever. But things are being changed. They even tried to take BC and AD from their history books, and our democracy and history are being destroyed. The young people today are taught very little about our history. Ask them about the Magna Carta, they won't know what you're talking about. They think it's an ice cream probably. And it's sad, it's pathetic, but unfortunately it is true, and I speak as an ex-school governor of a secondary school. I've seen it happen in the classroom. Talk to the children, and they know precious little. A few years back, an independent MEP called Ashley Moat found out that the European Union was going to bring in a common history book for all of Europe. And it was rewritten to reflect the modern cohesiveness and coming together, that we all love each other, etc. They rewrote a few inconvenient facts of history, airbrushed out of history. They include World War I and World War II. Didn't happen. If you actually bring up young children who've got an attention span of a gnat, because they all see on TV, if you cut and edit things, flash, 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 and then it's a music video and a couple of adverts, they haven't learned anything. They're not capable. A lot of them, I mean, I'm generalising clearly, of sitting down there and taking in information in a serious manner for a serious amount of time. It's very much used by all these mobile devices. Information comes in. It's not for sort of long-term sitting down and learning. It's just flash, 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 teaching how, you know. They get a very sort of sketchy view of the world, and particularly of history. And of course, if we don't know history, particularly Bible history and prophecy, then we're in danger of being very badly led astray, and that is about to happen. So Ashley Moat made such a fuss that they did withdraw the book, but subsequently he had to withdraw from the European Union because something was, whether it was a fix or whatever happened, I don't know, but he was accused of something and had to step down. Here are the EU enforcers, the gendarmerie, armed police, who can cross EU borders. I was with an MEP some years back in Brussels, and yeah, it was Strasbourg. Sorry, Strasbourg, and we were walking by the European Parliament building, which has got a lot of glass in it, you see, and I noticed that the cobbles there in Strasbourg were all concreted over in this area in front of the Parliament building, and I said, "Why is that?" And he said, well, the farmers used to gather here, prize them out and chuck them at the passing Eurocrats, you see, in gratitude for all they were getting. So he said, we stopped all that by concrete and mow, you see. I said, well, they must love you if you have to do that. And he said, this is how we stopped it. He said, come and follow me. And I went down the road, and there was a bunch of these people looking like Darth Vader and the Stormtroopers, all in their riot gear. As far as I know, they were on, it wasn't just a special day, on permanent standby, ready to crack heads. It's going to get quite vicious because there will be a lot of social and civil unrest in Europe. You've got mega unemployment in countries like Greece and Spain. Youth unemployment is something like 64% in Greece, I believe. It's really bad in Spain and Portugal. A friend of ours is Portuguese. She was back in Portugal a few months ago, and she said the government there is advising young people to emigrate. Where to? I can't imagine. But what a message of despair that is. We can't even emigrate, you know. Wow, dear, oh dear. So things are going to get very, when food starts to get short, what provoked the so-called Arab Spring was food prices and food shortages. Commodity prices rise. If you look at the commodities exchange, commodity prices in the last few years have gone very high. This means the poorer countries literally can't buy food. Ethanol takes up a major part of the corn production of America. So nations like Israel, which are very populous but very poor, they can't get enough to feed their people, so they get agitated. This is how nations have changed, you see. This is how the ring is going to form up around Israel. That's another story. Things are going to get ugly. Here is the European police state as predicted by the Daily Telegraph. The fast-growing Euro police force, Europol, very Nazi-like. EU police will eventually have powers of arrest in Britain. It'll all come, now parliamentarians are too weak-willed to stop it. Russell's spin doctors are told that truth must often be hidden. And this was actually sent out in an email. I met some of their spin doctors, and I know how this happened. They actually sent an internal memo saying, if there's an inconvenient truth, we'll hide it, you see. And one of them pressed the wrong button. It went out to all the press of the world, so they actually admitted that we must hide the truth. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Who is a deceiver and liar? The great liar and deceiver in chief is Satan. So I believe the European Union is a purely satanic edifice. It's mostly spiritual with political overtones. If you try and tell the truth, you can be in big trouble. This is a quote. Damaging the reputation of the European Union, like giving this talk, is now a crime against the EU, believe it or not. I always try and damage their reputation whenever possible. I'm still a free man at the moment. Even Mikhail Gorbachev has called the EU the new European Soviet. The EU is replacing its member states in a gradual political takeover. Right opposite where we used to live, we've got cameras there, 24 hours a day, you can just about see them, and they're focusing, they can swivel around, and they can actually, it wasn't there because of us, we're not important, but it could, if it wished, focus on every car and every person coming and going from the house. And here's another one, the all-seeing eye of street cameras, which we've got so used to, we've forgotten they're there. We're the most watched society in the world, by the way. We're the secret society monitor that China would like to become. They're actually taking away a lot of their historical names. And again, there are assemblies that supersede a lot of the Hampshire and county councils and so on. This is the new names that Europe is adopting for the English Channel. It's going to be called the Channel Sea. We live in southern England in the Manche region of Europe. Europe is now called, I think the full title of the European Union is the European Union of the Regions. So countries are being downgraded. Instead, you've got regional assemblies, regional units, all responsible to the centre in Brussels and Strasbourg. I live in fairyland. This is from the Daily Express. And it said the EU has a magical method of disposing of our taxes. It spent £37,000 on a film about fairies. As part of, not the other kind, real, you know, romantically fairy, as part of a strange project to promote its own fantasy land. I think Europe's one big fantasy land, actually. The Arc-Manche region, which unfortunately lumps part of southern England with northern France. So we know that in the end-time scenario there will be a world government. Revelation tells us very clearly the world will be ruled by Antichrist. And it'll be a world with regions. There are 10 regions of the world. Club of Rome years ago set this out. I've got all the plans actually, and there'll be 5 super regions, but it's all set out how it's all going to be controlled, and the world government plans are already there in being, and in fact we've got copies of them. As an EU administrative area, the film is about fairy tale landscapes and magical tales of enchantment, fairies, river spirits and giants within the EU region. So if you thought your taxpayer money was being used wisely, I'm sure it didn't actually, that's what it's spent on. The prophet Daniel, getting back to the word, interpreted a vision of world empires. The final evil empire, which will be destroyed, is the rock which smashes it when the Lord returns, is this restored Roman Empire, with 10 regions of the world supporting it. Here are the 10 regional groupings. This is from the UN. The report on progress of forming the 10 regions of the world is very, very far advanced. End times news. This is what the book of Daniel said. But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words. His prophecies scared him half to death, but they weren't for his time. He had to wait 2,500 years for them to come to fruition. The Bible, the author of the Bible is outside of time. Our God knows the end from the beginning. He is the ultimate Lord of time, and He knows the future. It's not a mystery. It's not a Nostra nonsense. The Bible is true. It's true prophecy. So Daniel was told to shut up the words and seal his book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro. We do that all the time as we travel, all of us. And knowledge shall be increased. Daniel chapter 12, verse 4. I often think, as I look at the internet, that never was there more knowledge available to more people at any one time, and yet seldom has so little knowledge been available to the right people who actually can act on it and use their common sense. But most people have fragments of it. They don't get the whole picture. They don't use that ability to access knowledge. Michael informed Daniel that at the right time, that's now, the prophet's sealed book will be unsealed. We had a friend called Barry Smith, some of you may have seen him, he was a great evangelist and teacher and preacher from New Zealand. He taught me a lot about prophecy. And I thought that when Barry died on a preaching tour of England in 2002, I may have even said to Power, but that's it. It must be the end, because Barry was the great end times preacher. That's it. It's got to be within months, or I didn't think it would be long. And that's how I felt. That was 13 years ago. 11 years ago. 2002, yeah. So poor Barry, well, he was promoted, not poor Barry. He was about 69, 70, I think. So he went, but it wasn't the end. We must not jump to too many conclusions. The sealed book is still being unsealed for those with eyes to see. Here's Bruegel's painting of the Tower of Babel. 5,000 years ago, this was a type of one world government. Since then, the world has consisted of individual sovereign nations. Indeed, God set the boundary of the nations. Babel was a type of the one world unity unit movement being repeated today, which will end with Antichrist's brief period of rule on earth. And if you can read it, just about the whole world, earth was of one language and one speech, etc., etc. And it will come again very much in the same way. Also, the same spiritual influences which came out of Babel and Babylon will be very much to the fore in the end times, as they are. All the false religions that we talk about, basically, give or take, had their roots in what came out of Babylon. You can actually do your own research on that. Babylon was a political, civil union of all the then inhabitants of the earth. They huddled together in the plain of Shinar. They didn't scatter out and populate the earth as the Lord had wanted. The tower was for religious purposes. This is the first example of world government and world religion joined as one. It's a prototype, if you like. Now we have the European flag, which in Catholic culture always signifies the crown of Mary, Queen of Heaven. In Babylonian culture, which is what we're really talking about in the EU, the Queen of Heaven was the title given to Semiramis, the mother of Nimrod, the builder and ruler of Babel. We were going by a Catholic church the other day and noticed again it was dedicated to the Queen of Heaven, Our Lady. Well, it's a pagan deity. Even the Catholic Bible says that, actually. The European Union flag is the Stars of Mary. It's quite interesting. Hardly anybody knows this or understands it. This is what we're talking about. This is the spiritual thing behind Europe. And when I was running the newspaper, a Catholic man called me up and he was protesting because he said, the European Union has taken a Catholic symbol and put it on its flag. I thought, that's interesting that he was protesting from that angle. You know, he'd seen what a lot of people hadn't seen. Spot the Eurostars. This is a Catholic poster of Mary. The Eurostars are. So if you actually have a passport or a driving license, it's got the Stars of Mary on it, all of them have. Mother of God, they call her. Well, Matthew 12:50 gives the lie to that. Whoever does the will of my Father, who is in heaven, he is my brother and sister and mother. God has no mother. It's a false title, you see. Satan has no new tricks. The old ones work so well. Europe is now preparing itself for the new Nimrod, and he will be a strong ruler. This is the European Parliament building in Strasbourg. They have twin headquarters, Strasbourg in France and Brussels in Belgium, and it's left unfinished deliberately and modelled on the Tower of Babel. You see, it's deliberately left unfinished, not by accident. This is a younger version of Nigel Farage, and the press actually, I like him. He's a very interesting man. A bit politically incorrect. He also smokes, but he's all right. I like him. He's honest. You know, what you see is what you get. He was heckling me once from the front row in a meeting because I was trying to teach them about communication. So he was sort of chortling and heckling. It's quite funny, actually. We had a good time. Anyway, he said when he saw this, he said something like, it's like the tower of a strange new religion rather than a political headquarters. And I thought that was quite an interesting insight from a secular politician. Anyway, the press called it the Tower of Babel. They didn't miss what everyone else has seemed to have missed. The fact that it's actually built as an exact modern version of the Tower of Babel. There it is again. And here is the Tower of Babel, old and new, a Christian artist together. These posters were issued by the European Union and show the Tower of Babel being rebuilt by what looked like robotic slave labourers. There they are, that's us presumably, Here's the crane rebuilding it at the top. And there it is. And they said, many tongues, one voice. I thought it was very interesting because, again, with my background in the occult, the first thing I noticed is very, very clear. If you look closely at the stars, they're inverted. The central points are downwards, as in witchcraft. They're pentagrams, you see. So I thought straight away, this is satanic. This is already dedicated to Satan. Quite clearly, that is not the normal star. That's very non-accidental, shall we say. There was a secular journalist at a press conference in Strasbourg, and he piped up and asked the officials of the European Union this question: why did you use the Tower of Babel, here it is, Tower of Babel, on your poster? Why the Tower of Babel? And this is what the official answer was: what they failed to complete 5,000 years ago, we in Europe will finish now. This is the motivation and spirit behind Europe. What about the woman riding the beast? Revelation 17. The woman riding the beast is very interesting. I actually have her in my pocket here somewhere. I've got the coin of the woman riding the beast. It's the Greek €2 coin, and I can show it to someone afterwards, but I've got it here. It's got the woman riding the beast. Mystery Babylon, the woman riding the beast. I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-coloured beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Upon her forehead was written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. This is not a good woman, a good image. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. Revelation 17 verses 4 to 9. Rome sits upon 7 hills. Now, I know there are many other places in the world where cities sit on 7 hills. But at the time this was written, Rome was ruling, and John would have been well aware that this was the most important centre of the world at the time. Rome, the city on 7 hills. And I think this is no accident that this is described as such. Guess what? The woman riding the beast is the official symbol of the European Union. I mean, it's the truth out there in plain view for those with eyes to see. It's not even being concealed anymore. It's absolutely obvious. But most people are too spiritually unaware and untaught to know. That's why we're trying to get our books and DVDs out, because we won't be able to much longer, I don't think. The truth is, not only the people, but the politicians, who are mostly not evil. You meet politicians, they're like anybody else, good, bad, and indifferent, you know. They basically, I think, from the ones I've spoken to, have absolutely no idea that they're fulfilling prophecy. Someone, I think, does. I think someone at the top institutes all this, but when you try and investigate, you say, where did it come from? Who started all this? Ian Paisley did this some years ago. Couldn't find out. You can't nail it down. It's like nailing jelly. You can't get to the bottom of it. Right, okay, here's another one. This was taken by 2 members of their church. The 4th and final beast, Rome, is rising again in Europe. The woman riding the beast is the one world church based in Rome. Won't just be the Catholic Church. It'll be, I believe, and this is just my interpretation, I think it's going to be world religions, including moderate Islam. Islam is going to be very severely dealt with in the not too distant future. When a group of them try to attack Israel and wipe it out, they in turn will be basically destroyed, not totally wiped out. So this is the statue erected to mark the origin of the EU. What do you see? The woman riding the beast. There it is. Europa on the bull. This statue is in Germany, in a little town called Breisach. It's near the Swiss border. And they say, it's not me saying this, on the plaque alongside, it was translated from the German by a member of our church. It represents the beginnings of a new Europe. So don't say that people don't know about this. No one told me. I'm telling you, tell other people, please. Here it is, the sculpture again, the woman. And do you see it's coming up out of the piazza here, riding straight to the door of the church? You see? That's the little village church or town church. And this is in Breisach, Germany, where the very first talks, which led to the founding of the Common Market, the European Union, the Treaty of Rome, started right here. And this is the symbol they chose. It's absolutely unarguable. If someone says, I don't believe that, show them, tell them, you know, it's true. I'm not making this up. I wish I was, actually. I wish it was a figment of my fertile imagination, because I'd sleep easier. But we shouldn't worry about it, because we know it's going to happen. Europe, this is what it says. This is part, we've cut some of it down. This is basically what it says. Europe reaches for the stars. Greek mythology tells of Zeus' transformation into a bull. On his back, he carries the king's daughter, Europa, from the east westwards to Europe, the land named after her, you see. As if rising through the waves of the sea, the bull rises through the stones of the paved plaza. Europa's hands and motion symbolise the beginnings of a new Europe. Breisach, where this sculpture stands, is where the earliest discussions took place, leading eventually to the Treaty of Rome that laid the EU foundations. It's Bible prophecy coming true before your eyes. The myth of Europa and the bull, I should just briefly explain it. I don't want to go into it too much, but in Greek mythology, it's pretty disgusting actually. Europa was the beautiful daughter of the king of Tyre in Lebanon. The story goes that Zeus, who was the main Greek god, desired to have Europa, so he transformed himself into a bull. Zeus lured Europa to climb on his back, then abducted her, swimming out to sea so she couldn't escape him. This sickening story was the basis for the Europa images in the European Union. You see what rotten spiritual foundations we're built on, this nation that claims sovereignty over Great Britain. The woman on the beast is on the seal of the EU, on coins of the EU, on stamps of the EU. It's on murals, sculptures and statues. People have sent me a number of them from different parts of Europe actually. The mother of harlots will be the beast Antichrist system. Check it out in Revelation 17. The woman is the ecumenical one world religion which is being formed up right now. And she is drunk with the blood of the saints. That's Christian martyrs. Yeah. You see these ecumenical movements everywhere. Anybody can now march for Jesus, whether they're a cultist or whatever. And we know people who belong to churches that we once were associated with. They say, oh, we're very ecumenical. I said, you belong to churches together? Oh, yes. I said, it should be called false churches together. Because all the stuff is... Doctrine divides. Yes, it certainly does. It cuts like a clean sword. And it should be used in that manner because it cuts out truth from falsehood. And doctrine doesn't matter. Oh yes, it does. Biblical doctrine matters a very great deal. I don't have time to go into it too much, but we do in our books much more. Faith is being diffused and blended and merged. It's kind of like a multi-faith, horrible sort of hodgepodge which turns that into a great big mess, a sort of ghastly stew of picks and mix religion. This is the multi-faith room. It used to be a Christian chapel in Heathrow Airport. I notice it every time I go through. And I've been inside it actually, and it's a kind of funny little place. But this is one of the symbols. Sorry, I didn't get a very good picture, but this is what's inside it. You see all the false religions all gathered together. One world, multi-faith, one world. You see, I can tell you a lot about the UN has done about this, but that's a different story. But you've got the yin and the yang, the Israeli Star of David. You've got all kinds of stuff in there, all kinds of occult symbols in there as well. There's a cross in there somewhere, Orthodox and so on. So, and you know that I told you about the World Parliament. This is their spiritual logo, exactly the same. It's coming from the same source, the World Parliament. I got that by a very strange method, actually. Some of this bigger journalist does sort of get doors open for you, so I've been very privileged. And we were one of the things we did, just one of the things, was a business newspaper, and they sent me some material about the World Parliament movement, you see. And I wrote back and said, this is very interesting, and tell me more, you know, and they thought I was a potential supporter. And I never said anything about the Bible or anything else. I was writing as a very innocent business journalist. And they sent me enough documents and papers to paper the wall of this place with. I mean, I've got tons of the stuff. And it was very, very, they even invited me to join them and become a delegate. I got the pictures and all that. You see, Antichrist one world government will carry the beast, only for 3.5 years. The woman, sorry. Antichrist wants to worship for himself. That side seems to be out of order, doesn't it? The 10 horns of world rulers which you saw, and the beast, Antichrist, these will hate the harlot church, and will make her desolate and naked, and will burn her up in fire, from Revelation 7:16. You see, this whore church is not going to last very long when it comes together, because, very simply, the Antichrist wants worship for himself. So he will actually turn on her midway through, and that will be the end. That will be the end of Rome, actually, and all the false religions. They'll be absolutely smashed to pieces. because there's only going to be one ruler, one spiritual leader, and that'll be Antichrist, the new Nimrod, you see. This is how it's going to develop. But at the moment, all the ecumenical people are huddling together. Oh, we can, you know, after all, religion causes wars, and, you know, if we all get together, we can all be peaceful and love each other. We were in some neighbours do, and they knew what we believed, and one of them shouted that. He said, of course, religion is responsible for all the wars, you know. I said, well, actually, the last two major wars, the biggest wars in world history, had nothing whatsoever to do with religion. World War I and II, talk about that. So that shut him up. Here again, the woman on the beast. This is an illustration at the Brussels Airport Lounge. As you go into Brussels, the main headquarters of the European Union, you pass through the lounge, and this is how they put a mural to illustrate it. There's the beast, look, and there's Europa, do you see? You have to sort of, once you know what to look for, you spot this. I should think 99.9% of the people who walk through there never even notice it, actually. Here again, the woman on the beast. This is from Germany, on a telephone card. If you look at Revelation 17, it tells of this mysterious character at the heart of prophecy, a woman who rides the beast. Who is she, this great whore? Two of the final chapters of the Bible are devoted to her. John's vision of her is one of the most remarkable prophecies in Scripture. And here is the seal of the EU with the woman and the beast. I'm sorry it's not very clear. Someone emailed it to me, and that's the best I've got. But there it is, the woman and the beast, the seal of the EU. Here's the coin I've got with me. This is the Greek €2 coin. Again, this is not coincidence. Nothing like this happens by chance. This is planned. This is indoctrination, the woman and the beast. It's kind of some kind of folk symbol, I guess, you know, or not, as the case may be. Right, the apostate church is pictured as a prostitute riding the beast in Revelation 17. This is called Sculpture 2000. It's about 10 feet long, and it's a bronze statue, and it's outside the European Council building in Brussels. There it is. So this is where the main movers and shakers of the European Union meet to decide the policy of the European Union. Every day, as the foreign ministers and representatives of nations go in to set the agenda for the European Union, this is the spiritual inspiration they walk by every day outside their front door. The woman on the beast. That's it. Outside the European Council building. I find that astounding, hideous actually. I mean, who would choose such a monstrous thing to be a statue to adorn your building? Again, there's a spiritual thing behind this. This is not just coincidence. When back in 1999 we had the first or the second elections to the European Parliament, directly elected MEPs for the first time, here's how Britain celebrated. The woman on the beast was a British stamp at the time. There's the beast, there's the woman. That's an old stamp issued in Britain. That was in 1999. Here is, I picked this up on a plane, and I thought, Der Spiegel, there it is. And it says, good morning, Europe. And it's all about, this is the Marianne. She's the symbol of the French Revolution, riding the beast, the woman riding the beast, you see. And the interesting thing is, there's people who talked about the values of the French Revolution being the values of the European Union. I've got quotes on that, and of course that ended up with about 1 million people killed and butchered and so on. So that's interesting. When the EU gave a present to Moscow, they gave a surreal statue of the woman on the beast. It's the centre of what is now called Europa Square in Moscow, and around on the edge are the flags of Europe. Because there's some movement to try and get Russia, European Russia at least, into the European Union. That's a hot topic. Why adopt this disgusting and foul myth of Europa and the bull as the symbol for Europe? There was no vote on this. You're not allowed to say no. If they've got a policy they're going to ram through, no one gets a say. Like everything else in Europe, it was foisted on a complacent, compliant, foolish generation which cannot be bothered to turn to God and study the Bible. It's this kind of easy believers and quick bless up, Joel Osteen, fairy stuff, you know, fluff daisy preaching. It gets you nowhere. It doesn't get to lead to study of the Word. People just don't take the time. It's not easy. You have to spend time in it to learn all this stuff, and people aren't prepared to spend it. They're happy with their lives as long as they've got something to watch on telly, a glass of wine in the evening, and something to eat. They're happy, most of them. And alcohol is one of the problems too, because it dulls the senses. won't go down that route. Should all this cause us to worry? No. Or fear? Certainly not. Because Luke 21 verse 28 makes it clear. These things are going to happen. We are going to be here at first. When you see these things begin to take place, straighten up. Lift up your heads. Because your redemption is drawing near. So that's the good news in end times preaching. People often say, have said to me in the past, well, this is so depressing. Someone told me it was the most depressing talk we'd ever heard. And I said, well, actually, if you're not saved, if you're not a believer, you are right to be depressed. Because you are actually going to be left behind as the world descends into turmoil and chaos and mayhem, and most people are going to be killed. But if you actually give your life to the Lord Jesus and get covered by his blood and repent of your sins and adopt him as your Saviour, then you can be taken out of it. That's the good news in end times preaching. Whether he ever did, I don't know. And our dear friend Sheila said this when we were talking about it. Very switched on lady. She said, it's so exciting living now. The prophecies of the Bible are coming true. The Lord Jesus Christ is coming back soon. That's what all this is leading to. It's the preliminary stuff. We're on the countdown to Antichrist. But really, we should all be looking to the return of the Lord Jesus Christ in the second advent. Coming back to rule in wrath and glory. Coming back in wrath. He's coming back not as the Lamb of God, but as the Lion of the tribe of Judah. A very different incarnation. First comes his character, Antichrist, and he will unite the whole world under one government. There'll be the one world religion I've spoken of. Antichrist will eventually, after the first 3.5 years, head that also. A one world currency will soon follow. And again, you can see currencies being merged around the world, particularly as we go into electronic transactions. That's how it's going to be done. We'll actually not have notes and things very much longer. It'll just be dots and we'll just wave our wristwatch and we'll buy and sell things. That's all actually taking place right now, by the way. All the developments are coming forward at a rate of knots. Things are changing so fast. The Bible's prophecies are coming true each day in the news as the revived Roman Empire rises in Europe. Financial meltdown is how it's going to be brought in, I believe. People, if they're scared, will agree to almost anything. If they're going hungry, if there's no work, no jobs, no money, and their house is just about to be repossessed, they won't be praising this God of wealth creation of their own imagination. They'll be looking for a strong man to get them out the hole. Cash is going to crash. Barry Smith used to say, I loved it. I can't do it like he did. Cash will crash in a flash, Alan. And he's right, that's what's going to happen. Then you'll see the one world currency here soon. World government will quickly follow. They're actually going to take control of all the ocean beds and all these sea mineral sources and so on. And this is how it's all going to be worked. The UN, what's it called? The Law of the Sea. That's already in place. In fact, we used to know one of the delegates to the Law of the Sea used to stay at their house when they had the meetings in London, and all of this is actually being put in place right now, a framework to internationalise the seabeds of the world. That's all ready to go. And they never waste a good crisis. This has been said by European Union officials. Never waste a good crisis. The Eurozone since 2008 has really stumbled and stuttered and threatened to fall apart. I knew it never would, because we know that it's destined to be the final world empire. But it's had some shaky moments, particularly in the southern European nations. Eurozone in crisis. For weeks and weeks, months in fact years, they've had the word crisis is safe. They're not safe. Pensions are not safe. Nothing is safe. The only thing that's safe is the word of God. That's where we should put our trust, on the rock, our feet on the rock. Something big and dramatic will take place to bring this big, last change into being. People are not going to go along with all this until they have to, or feel that they have to. Perhaps Mars can come to our aid. Maybe the senario there will, because the world is broke. The whole world hasn't got enough money. This is something that Trichet, the European Central Bank, warned central banks. He said, central banks' balance sheets are profoundly abnormal. That's the very serious thing for a bank to say. This one now, I took this off CNBC one morning when I was watching it. I thought it was great, actually. Central bank action to actually destroy the value of money, which is going to lead to hyperinflation, is the work of the devil. And I thought, you got it right in one, my friend. This was Weidmann, who was the head of Germany's Bundesbank, so he's no fool. He runs the Bundesbank, the most powerful bank in Europe. And he compared the European Central Bank Governor, Mario Draghi's bond buying program with the devil's work. Buying your own debt, in other words. Actually, the government is buying its own debt, effectively. He said central banks pumping money into the economy reminded him of the scene in Faust as the devil, Mephistopheles, disguised as a fool, convinces an emperor to issue large amounts of paper money. Cash will crash in a flash. In this classic, money printing solves the kingdom's financial problems. Wouldn't it be lovely? We could all get unlimited amounts of money, we'll all be rich, it's great. But the tale ends badly with rampant inflation. What else could happen if you think about it? If a central bank creates unlimited money from nothing, this is what the leading bankers said, which they're doing, particularly in America, under Bernanke, creating money out of nothing, just with a keyboard touch, you know. If it creates unlimited money from nothing, how can it ensure money is sufficiently scarce to keep its value? You can't. It's clearly going to lead to inflation. If it worked, we'd soon all be as rich as Zimbabwe. That's a 50 billion, I think it is, $50 billion note in Zimbabwe. It's a sad story.
Where was all the
In
money
poor
gone?
Zimbabwe, which was once a very prosperous nation, these things blow around on rubbish tips, and they're not worth as much as the tin cans they say for sale. This is what the currency is worth when you inflate it, when you pump up the presses, you know. Yeah, the daily headlines that I like to watch, they always include the word crisis. Never waste a word crisis. A common currency will lead to this common leader. A nationwide crisis leaves global solutions. There are no strong countries. German banks are in dire straits. That's why they're loaning all this money to Greece, because German banks are owed an awful lot of money by Greece. They have leverage, in other words, they've lent out, some of these banks, 40 times their assets. So if they've got £1 in their vault, theoretically, it's not really in their vault, they lend £40 out. That's to put it very simply. Germany is helping Greece out of pure self-interest to try and keep its own banks from going broke. When currency collapses, as it did in the Weimar Republic, you get your strong man, you see. With diverse governments and policies, as we have in Europe at the moment, you cannot for long run a joint currency. This means you have to have a single monetary authority. Central control, in other words. Weak and desperate countries like Portugal and Greece and Spain and even Italy, and people will agree to anything. Europe is now bringing forth what they call a banking union. All the banks will be under the same control. This means changing the Lisbon Treaty. So they're all if once you've got control of the money, you've got control of everything. Yeah. I can assure you of that. So will we tighten our belts and try and pay some of these debts off? No, that's not going to happen. That's no fun, is it? We want to spend. We're going to print even more money and create even more debt. They're doing that like crazy under Obama. Crazy is the word. Robert Mundell, who's known as the father of the euro, has been going around the world saying we're going to bring out a new world currency. Speaking of the need for a new international currency, he said it would be a combination of the dollar, the euro, and the yen. This only becomes possible, again, the crisis situation, in response to a felt need and the threat of a global crisis. That's what we've got all the time, rumbling along under the surface. Since 2008, nothing has been solved. They've bought some time. I was astounded. I thought, predicted actually, I thought, well, in 2008, this is it, you know. A lot of people thought the year 2000, I thought 2008, wow, this is going to lead to the final denouement. But they've actually staved it off for a few years. It's not quite the right time yet, you see. But the crisis is still out there. When the euro and the world currency was mooted, and they brought out the euro, they were talking about a world currency. This was a big advert, a full page in the Financial Times. A Swiss bank put it in. This is the coming world currency, you see? That's the yen, that's the euro, that's the dollar merged into one. You see how they're trying to sell the idea? They didn't have any words on the advert. I knew straight away what it meant because that's my thing. The plan for a global currency is far advanced. And this is a story from China. The Chinese news agency said that a new stable and secure global reserve currency may also be an option to avert a catastrophe caused by any single country. You see, globalization, new world order. This is Dmitry Medvedev, and he unveiled a new world coin. This was back in 2009. And again, in a Geneva meeting, not a lot of people spotted this. Again, but it was a press conference. Now, if the Prime Minister of Russia launches a press conference to talk about a new world coin, this is serious.
Yeah.
These are not jokers.
Nothing came of that though, did it?
Well, they've got it there in the background. It wasn't meant to be introduced then. It was just a sort of, yeah, how about that? And he's sowing the seeds, you see. I mean, to actually design and produce and mint a coin cost a lot of money. This was not sort of some amateur affair. And the words on it say, United Future World Currency. That's what it said all on the side. That was actually minted and produced. It wasn't meant to be the actual currency. It was just spinning forth an idea. See how it was taken, you see? This is what he said, the leader of Russia. In all likelihood, something similar could appear, and it could be held in your hand and used as a means of payment. There we are. This is the international currency. No one will be able to buy or sell without this international currency. It will eventually be, I believe, some kind of chip or mark of the beast, but this is the way it's past moving very fast. The truth is there. You can find it out. Anyone can find any of this stuff out if they look. You look hard. Herman van Rompuy, who's the EU president, he finally admitted that the man in the street in Europe was misled over the political and economic, and I would add spiritual, implications of the European Union. This is what he said to civil servants. Nobody ever told the proverbial man in the street that sharing a single currency was not just about making lives easier when doing business or travelling abroad, but also about being directly affected by economic developments in neighbouring countries. Treaty of Rome, again, going back to that, held there at the invitation of the Vatican. Soon after, it turned into the common market, then the European Economic Union, then the European Union, which aims to dominate world trade. Interestingly, and it's also interesting that Tony Blair became a Catholic after he left office, and its leading figures have all been Catholic. Yeah. Some of them have been fast-tracked to sainthood. You don't get to run the European Union unless you're a Catholic, I don't believe. When John wrote down the book of Revelation, it was revealed to John by the Lord. It wasn't his revelation, remember. The Roman Empire was spreading false religion, polluting the nations with idolatry, and persecuting the church. Already in debate in the European Union, evangelical Christianity has been described as a cult. Some of it probably is, actually. But this is another one. This is from the Daily Express about a secret plot to create a super powerful EU president and abolish nation states. This was quite recent, actually. And Europe's shady Berlin group wants to wipe us off the map. They actually want to scrap the nation state. Again, very far advanced. Here is Mr. Blair, slippery Mr. Blair, who actually I think has his eye on the EU presidency at some stage. I may be wrong, that's just my thought. And he certainly has been promoted in the past. And this is what he said. The EU needs a powerful figurehead. I wonder who he's got in mind. I'm not saying he's going to be the Antichrist. Not at all. But he's a sort of forerunner. They're getting all the power gathered together. You see. Any more than Obama is. Who is he in the end? No, he's not the Antichrist. He's got a Roman origin for a start. The EU constitution gives the EU precedence over national parliaments in virtually all areas of life. National parliaments in Europe are now much like the state assemblies in America. We have a plethora of presidents. We've got a president of the European Parliament from Germany. Then there's this ex-Maoist from Portugal, José Manuel Barroso, who's the president of the EU Commission. Along with these two, there's a rotating, are you paying attention? Are you up with this? I'm going to test you later. There's a rotating EU presidency which goes on a 6-monthly basis. At the moment, when I wrote this a couple of 3 months ago, it was held by Ireland. Last but not least is the damn rag himself. This is the president of the European Council, Herman van Rompuy. He's a fairly weak little person. But he's not going to be there. All these people are going to be cast aside very rapidly because desperate people often, I put sometimes, but I would say often, look for a strong man. This is Weimar Germany with piles of worthless paper money. What are you going to do? Well, Hitler tried to unite Europe under one government. He wanted a new Europe with a common currency, one government and one law. He called his plan the New World Order. And he's been described as the first Europhile. There he is. This is Paul Henri Spark, who was one of the early promoters of the EU over 50 years ago. This is what he said. We need a strong man. We don't want another committee. We have too many already. Most will say amen to that. What we want is a man of sufficient stature to hold the allegiance of all people. We would want him to lift us out of the economic morass into which we are sinking. Send us such a man, and be he God or the devil, we will receive him. And I believe they will. If you think, how did they receive Obama? In America, they would say he came from left field. He came from nowhere. Nobody had heard of this mystery man, this Manchurian candidate, who suddenly was foisted onto America with a great gush of admiration from the liberal press, you know. Oh, I mean, his background really does not bear close examination for a whole variety of reasons. But they created him out of nothing in a few months. Think what they could do with Antichrist. I just put that as a thought. You know. That strong man who is out there in the wings, I believe, certainly believe he's alive. I don't know where he is, but I can guess, but that's pointless. He will be the man of sin, the Antichrist, prophesied in both the Old and New Testaments, from Genesis to Revelation. And I've got a pug for our book up here, and it came up and surprised me. A lot of the background of falsehood and things that are going on is in that particular book. So I just put that in before I finish. And the Goodbye book, which has got chapters on Europe, the New World Order, the European Union, the one world religion, tying it all together, it tells you how time is short, really. A little bit longer than I thought when we wrote the book together, Pat and I, but the end times are certainly here, the real end times. And if you want to keep up to date with all the things that we, in fact, haven't had much time to do the last couple of months, but we've got a ticker from the Jerusalem Post coming in, giving you Middle East news every day. The Berean Call has all its news coming onto our website, and we put stuff on as well. If you want a particular subject, we've got a search engine top right, and you just key in the keywords, and it'll bring up hundreds of articles. We've got hundreds and hundreds of articles archived and written over the years on every conceivable subject, from the timing of the rapture to the identity of Antichrist, or will he be a Muslim, etc., why he won't be, and all kinds of things like that. So every conceivable subject in great detail. Should women wear the head covering? Why tithing isn't for today? We have a scriptural and political, all kinds of things, but mostly Bible-based prophecy subjects. So don't be depressed. Look up. Our redemption is surely drawing near. And remember too, at the end of the story, the Lord comes back to rule and reign from Jerusalem. That's when we'll have perfect peace at long last. So we'll end, as Dave Regan likes to end, by crying out, Maranatha, Maranatha, come quickly. Lord Jesus, he put an end to all this horrible stuff that's going on, and he will come quickly. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you.